Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Friday. This is the Vidor Locksmith Show. I am your host, David Gibson, and we are unlocking the secrets to success one interview at a time here in the oil and gas industry. I thank you guys so much for tuning in to watch. I completely forgot to pull up the proper screen over here. It actually just paused everything over here, so now that's not showing me who I was watching. So as per normal, if you guys would, let me know if you guys can hear me to make sure that everything is working properly. I don't think we're completely out of the woods on making sure that LinkedIn actually works right. We had a couple of the other LinkedIn Live people that I know had some serious issues last week getting their feed to work. We also had some issues on this show. So just as a heads up, if you guys are watching, if it's not coming through clearly on LinkedIn, we are also live streaming on YouTube, so you can watch either on YouTube or on LinkedIn. Either one should hopefully work, but some of the people that were at least outside of the US said that it was clear and a lot more crisp on YouTube than it was on LinkedIn. So just looking at some of the stuff that's already coming across, I have looked over and seen that it looks like I'm a little fuzzy at times. So just to let you know, YouTube or LinkedIn, try out either one of them. So we've already got what looks like 51 people watching on YouTube, 45 here on LinkedIn. So good numbers all around. Guys, let me know where you are watching from. I will start throwing up some of those up on the screen. So we've got Abbas from Iraq, John from India, best regards from Venezuela and Chile. I'm not sure how you're representing time, but hey, works for me. Kurt in Calgary, thank you for always watching, sir. We do appreciate it. Brian Dugas, who's always one of my favorites to have watching the show. He always has great commentary in the comment section. So I do have a big special announcement for you guys. We do have a sponsor for today's show, and it's, drumroll, me. GibsonReports.com. So be sure to go check out the website if you're looking for anything as far as directional drilling MWD market share in the US. So once again, the show's hosted by me. It's sponsored by me. It's brought to you by me, but it's all for you guys that are out there watching. So looks like we're still getting people rolling into the show here. We've got an amazing show for you guys today. Today's going to be an excellent opportunity to be able to learn an amazing amount on managed pressure drilling. So before we bring on the host, as per normal, let's see if we've got any other people that are letting us know where they're watching from. So Nils in Dallas, Texas, Nils and the guys up there at DigiDrill, thanks for watching. And it's probably just him because they're probably doing social distancing, working from home and stuff. So it's probably not a whole bunch of them. Siswaro from Jakarta. So somebody's up late. I just butcher names. We got somebody watching from Kuwait. Brian Pickle from Houston, Texas. All right. And France from Mexico. I have no idea where Lolo Bulan. Mr. Squarts. I don't know where that's at, but that sounds like a very interesting place. I'd love to go visit sometime. And then also Nazar from Pakistan. Guys, thank you guys so much for the support. Like, it really means a lot to me to be able to have y'all support and be able to do this. I did not do what I was supposed to do over here. Oh, that's probably why we don't have as many people watching the show as possible. I didn't send out the, hey, we're live now on the group thing. So that's done. Hopefully I won't get as many messages. So as per normal, I'm going to play a little commercial break for a show that I also do. And then we'll come back with our guest today and get this thing started. So once again, guys, let me know where you're watching from. Tag a friend in the comments if they have any interest, the slightest bit, in learning about managed pressure drilling, or if they haven't even heard about the Vidor Locksmith Show. That would be great to be able to introduce them to that. And as well, what is it? Follow the hashtag. Follow the Vidor Locksmith hashtag. We've got a lot of really cool shows coming up. We've got David Ramson Wood next week. The week after that, I believe, is Peter Aird. After that, we've got Mark Anderson, and then Kurt Meyer, and then the IBM Artificial Intelligence Machine Learning team is going to come on and teach us whole bunch of cool stuff. So Ben Amaba and the whole artificial intelligence team over there at IBM, I'm really, really, really thankful that they're going to take the time to be able to do some really cool stuff with us. So once again, we've got Saudi watching, Oklahoma watching, Nigeria tuning in. Divine, thanks so much for being here. John from the UK, Brazil, James needs to, hey, if anybody needs any drilling optimization, drilling dynamics, need somebody to look at from a consultant basis, James is an amazing guy. Be sure to reach out to him, send him a LinkedIn connection. Same for me. If you guys haven't connected yet, send out a LinkedIn connect with myself and with our guest today, Calvin Holt. So on with the show. Let's do a little better. No, that's the wrong one. This one. Let's play this and we'll be right back. All right, guys, and we are back with you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here. We have our amazing guest today, Calvin Holt. Calvin, thank you for being here, sir.
Oh, my pleasure, David, really. And compliments to you on your lineup coming up. Wow, that's a big hitter list coming up. I feel quite privileged to be out here.
Hey, you were part of that big hitter list, sir. Don't be too humble. You were recommended, and I should say this. So Martin Parker and the guys over at Pruitt, Martin was one of the people that recommended to have Calvin be able to come on the show. So big thank you to any of the team over at Pruitt for being able to nominate somebody else actually outside of their organization, even though they do MPD stuff, to nominate somebody else outside of their organization to be able to come on the show and not just take the spot for themselves. So very big special thank you to you guys for doing that, Martin. I know that Martin right now is actually traveling right now. He said he was going to catch up and watch this one a little bit later, but thank you very much. So Calvin, just as a background, how did you get into the oil and gas business? How did you start?
Oh, oil and gas. My dad was Schlumberger for forever, and so like you have military brats, I was an oil field brat. Most of my time was overseas. So I just love the lifestyle. I love the work. I love the ethic. I like the people. So it was natural. My brother's in it too. So he's a University of Tulsa grad. He works for Crescent Point up in Calgary. But myself, it's I don't want to date myself, but yeah, it's 30 plus years now. Graduated tech, petroleum engineer. Schlumberger initially as a field engineer, then Weatherford for 18 years, and had a great time at Weatherford. The sort of last sort of decade was with underbalanced drilling and managed pressure drilling, and really that's my passion now. Has been for a while. And you mentioned Martin. When we were putting this show together, you asked for some folks, and I suggested Chris Scarborough with BP. And I know the feeling was let's get an operator side here, but there's a ton of folks out there that are very passionate about MPD, and we just got off the IDC committee meeting last 2 days, and really good group out there, men and women, really passionate about it, and it's something that is coming, and that's kind of what the topic is today. The folks that I'm going to mention and some of the things that we'll see today are all part of my development. I always say the Canadians kind of taught me. I got my Bachelor of Science in UBD with the Canadians, because in my opinion that's really where it started to gain traction. The MPD came from UBD. Weatherford was doing a lot of acquisitions in that space, and so there's a lot of talent there. Then as I met Steve, and Steve did a great job a couple of weeks ago, really doing the fundamentals, and we, like he said, we did have a good time. We had some challenges in Asia, but between him and Ken Muir, that's kind of where I got my master's in MPD. And then, right now I'm with Chevron, and they hired me for the dual gradient drilling project. And for that, I kind of consider that the PhD. And we'll talk a little bit about dual gradient here. I got a slide on that. So, that's a roundabout way of where I'm at right now. And again, thanks for letting me get a chance to kind of give my opinions. Yeah, obviously, these are my opinions, and one of the reasons when you come on as an operator is you have to either have to give the whole slide deck and wait, quite a while to get vetted, or in this case, I'm not showing any proprietary information, and these opinions are my own.
Well, I'm glad they are your opinions, and we don't have to work through the legal battle of any employers to get conversations started. So with that, everybody that is watching, thank you guys so much for being here. If you guys have not already, connect with myself on LinkedIn and with Calvin. If you haven't followed it, follow the Vidor Locksmith hashtag, and that's where I'll end my own little pitch here. I'll turn it over to Calvin. The stage is yours, sir. Let's see if we can get this up. Uh-oh.
So what are we seeing here?
We are seeing everything. So you might have to go
like that. Let me see if I can do this.
Might have to go with just the. Oh, yeah, that'll work.
That'll work. Okay, so I can't see you, but it's all right. I can hear you.
No worries. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take myself off the screen, and then as the questions and stuff are coming in, I will jump back in at random points in time just to be able to throw them out there.
All right. Well, thanks again, and I appreciate everybody giving us your time to learn a little bit more about MPD. I'm going to expand on what Steve presented. Again, very well, and I highly recommend Steve for any kind of MPD planning that you need to do. My topic is around basically some of the issues that's facing MPD and has been for a while. And so my theme is a little tongue in cheek about how we're trying to grow an MPD. I would like to start with a quick safety moment because I made the mistake of letting everybody know I was going to do the Texas 200. So I got some requests about how to go. And from this slide, it went great. It's a Texas intercoastal sailing event, small boat, shallow boats. We're talking about maximum 10, 15 feet of water, and really gets into inches at some point when you get close. So you can see it was great. Had a good time, but unfortunately, it put me into a state of complacency. This is my third one I've done, and the weather for the first 3 days was great. There was no forecast for any thunderstorms or storms, period, for the week. And of course, just like when we're drilling a well, not every well is the same and not every day is the same. So here's just some images going left to right. This is the one on the left is you can see the storm coming. I'm in there somewhere. I didn't get out of it. I wasn't able to get out of it, and I made some poor decisions, some even no decisions, and that's where the complacency comes in. When you're in a small boat in shallow water, it feels like the middle picture where the waves are huge and your boat's getting swallowed. I wasn't in the Gulf, but the intercoastal was there. It was around Port Aransas where I eventually capsized. And on to the right, you can see my rescuer. It looks like calm, clear water, and it was eventually after about two hours of storm. And you can see the timeline there about the wind at the bottom there. You can see the wind graph. Winds were sustained at about 30 miles an hour, and we had peaks of 40. So it was a force 5. And of course, I'm going to blame this on everybody but myself. I'll blame it on Steve for cursing me by wishing me good luck and keeping the mast pointing upwards, because I didn't do it. I did get capsized, and it was about an hour and a half in the water. So like any good drilling engineer or engineer in particular, you want to do a look back and you want to try to understand, from the Swiss cheese model where it went wrong. And
hey, Calvin,
yeah.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
Let's try to redo the screen share because I know when we tested it the other day, it was actually coming in a little bit bigger. I think since you selected the whole screen versus just selecting that program, it looks a little bit different. So I'm going to remove it off because we can't. I know the other day when we tested it out, I could see the text there from Steve. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. We're just having a quick little break. I just want to make sure that we're bringing you guys.
What view do you want me to put it? I'll go back to the original.
At stream. Or try to, because it can give you on the screen share, it gives you the opportunity to pick.
Right Read. Well, I think I only have 3 modes, Dave. And the text isn't that important. This is a small one. I mean, if it's just that one, if it gets worse. Well, of course, we do have some more questions. You there?
Sorry about that, guys. My computer actually crashed on that one.
Wow.
Here. Try it again one more time, Calvin, but instead of just picking the screen, pick the program. It should say at the top when you do the screen share, instead of picking a screen, it should allow you to be able to, at the top, it should have different tabs.
It says present online, custom slideshow. I'm not. Is that okay? I mean, what's the exact problem? If it's just the text, I'm going to turn it off and bring it up.
Oops. Sorry, mine keeps crashing. So Calvin, when you pull it up, it gives you the first option to pick a screen. Do not select screen. Go to the top and hold on, I'm having to. We lost. Oh, are we losing Calvin?
I'm here.
So on yours, when you go to do the share screen, it can say either a program or a full screen. Don't select the full screen because it's making the presentation portion of it smaller.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Be patient with us. It should say at the top a program.
I got it.
And then you just want to select the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
There we go. Now we're cooking. That should make it a little bit larger, a little bit easier to read. Yep. Okay. And if it didn't make a difference, I apologize, everybody.
No.
Doing my best here. All right. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to interrupt your flow. So go ahead. We're at the.
It's not one of my brightest moments, but
no worries.
From a safety point of view, complacency is rampant. I at the IDC committee yesterday, we talked about the unit trust Red Mountain incident, the blowout that took 5 lives, and the amount of complacency and bad practices was just amazing, astounding, depressing. And this incident here, humbled me. And I mean, I'm out here to learn to sail, but at the same time, I've still got a lot to learn, and you can't take this stuff for granted at any time. So moving on. Okay, so we've got roughly 70 slides, and the last 8 or 10 are around the option of folks wanting to stick around to see some animation around the basics of constant bottom hole pressure, courtesy of Cigna and Dennis Moore. We've got 5 topics here: definitions, the use case, what we call the technology chasm, the future, some future interest in interesting items in managed pressure drilling, I feel, and then the current state. So with that, we'll get moving. I have 4 key messages here that hopefully come through. And one is that MPD has arrived. It is a mature technology. It is complicated, although the principles of managed pressure drilling, from the hydraulics point of view, are quite simple to understand from a surface back pressure and continuous mode. It's still a complicated operation to put together, and primarily because it's not just one person running it like a directional service or a top drive. It takes a lot of folks to make it happen. there's still a lot coming. There's a lot of new innovations in MPD coming, and will continue to come, and you'll see that, and it's just a natural progression of any technology. And in my opinion, in within the drilling industry, it is definitely the most exciting drilling technology we have. So to get started in any kind of project, you kind of want to understand roles and responsibilities, and you kind of want to understand what exactly is it that we're doing. And so the beginning of any wisdom or any success is really defining the terms of what we're doing. And to be frank, and I know hopefully a lot of the MPD folks will vote that are in the know, the definitions within managed pressure drilling are not easy, and they overlap, and there's some confusion. So here's my attempt to try to reduce some of that. So Steve last week presented this table of managed pressure drilling. And so I'm going to use this as a way to talk about some of the issues we have with definitions. First off, if we're going to define things, we should refer to IDC, Underbalanced Operations and Managed Pressure Drilling Committee. And that committee's been around for a while. As I said earlier, a lot of good, hardworking men and women that are in there doing what's best for managed pressure drilling. And the challenges that we face trying to implement this technology are not for the faint of heart. But we sort of hamstring ourselves a little bit when we have different definitions. So you'll notice there's the UBO component here. So what managed pressure drilling is not, it's not performance drilling or underbalance drilling. That comes under the UBO definition. We're gonna focus the rest of this presentation on the last two columns, managed pressure drilling and dual gradient. And of course, we're saying managed pressure drilling twice here. So let's see if we can work through that a little bit. Instead of saying managed pressure drilling for all of these methods, let's talk about it being controlled pressure or pressure control. Some people even say unconventional drilling, methods. Then you bring back performance and underbalance, and those each of these categories have a particular need. Air, mist, foam, aerate has been around for a long time. It's primarily for increasing ROP. Underbalanced was quite famous there for a while, and was gaining a lot of traction in increasing reservoir productivity. I think over the years, the fracking revolution has kind of put that to bed, but there's still UBD going on, but not what maybe the initial backers expected it to be. The last two columns, we're trying to improve efficiencies in drilling, non-productive time reductions and mitigations. So and I know Nasir's online. I saw him on there. So you're going to see throughout this some of the questions that came up in Steve's that I'll try to touch on very quickly. And Nasir wanted to know, not wanted to, he probably knows, but what's the difference between UBD and MPD? And again, it's a timely question because in the committee meeting yesterday, we are going through that right now. And it's, in my opinion, it's the single biggest, stumbling block, for lack of a better phrase. Managed pressure drilling and well control are interchangeable in some respects, but for safety reasons, and we do not call UBD MPD, and we certainly don't call it well control. So visually, what does UBD look like, and how is it different than managed pressure drilling? This is UBD, all right? This is intentional. This can either be an oil flowing with associated gas or a pure gas well. As I mentioned, the Canadians perfected this art, and it's a well-established science. Oh, did you see that okay?
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. So what's the difference between UBD and MPD? So here's an MPD operation. You could also call this a conventional drilling operation. We've got what we typically call nuisance gas. We didn't intend for this to happen, but it's coming in. It's not quite enough to trigger a flare, but this flare did pop once or twice. But we're drilling ahead. We know we have gas, but it's not interfering, and it's not a danger because we have the equipment to handle it. And if you remember in the definition that Steve brought up, at MPD, we do not invite an influx. There's no intention of an influx coming in, but it happens. Are we going to shut down and rig down MPD? No, we're going to handle it. So we moved from controlled pressure drilling to now what we'll term as managed pressure drilling. When people say MPD, 99% of the time, unfortunately, they and myself included, we talk about surface back pressure, and that's the using a choke system with a flow meter typically to apply back pressure to the well to manage our constant bottom hole pressure profile.
Hey, Calvin, hold on just a second. We're getting a lot of people that are saying that they can't see the video, or they can't see the PowerPoint portion. Can't see videos. So let me pull this off the screen, add it back.
Well, maybe.
I don't know what's happening because I'm seeing it on my end. If anybody is listening, you guys can't hear. Please maybe try to refresh the window or pull the video back up. I think we're only getting this from the people that are on LinkedIn. If you guys are on YouTube, please comment. Let us know if you guys can still see it. Trying to do our best here.
I've just got the MPD version of gas going.
All right, please replay this.
I can share it. I can probably post those on YouTube if anybody really cares.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting people saying they can see it now. So, all right. Well, I guess that was just a minor blip. Maybe it was some of the people just couldn't see it there for a second. I can see and hear and everything on my end. All right. You
want me to re-show it or just keep going?
No. I think we're good. We'll just keep going from there. I think it might have been just no video on YouTube or on LinkedIn. What? All right, you guys are confusing me. Some are seeing it, some aren't. So I'm getting a thumbs up from across the room saying that they can see everything. So
all right, we'll move ahead.
If you guys don't get to see it, you're just not lucky enough. Ha ha ha. Sorry guys, I can't fix all the problems in the world. I can only there's predicaments and problems, and this is a predicament, something I can't solve. So we're gonna march forward. I'm getting off the screen. Calvin, it's back to you. I'm sorry for interrupting you so much.
No, it's all right. Okay, so surface back pressure is the most common form of MPD practiced, and when people talk about MPD, they typically mean that. But there's other forms that are frankly more mature. Floating and pressurized mud cap, which I don't consider dual gradient, but is managed pressure drilling, has been around for a long time, and is a very, very effective managed pressure drilling method. Frankly, probably the most common in use, or at least it was until surface back pressure maybe just now finally doing it. It's mainly practiced in Asia and with carbonates and karst formations with lost circulation. Continuous circulation we're gonna talk about briefly, and then we'll move to dual gradient, which is sort of near and dear to my heart. Very excited to talk about controlled mud level drilling and some of the improvements that are going on there, and we'll briefly touch on seabed pumping services. Now, within the committee, there is a DGD subcommittee. And again, just trying to show folks that there's a lot to manage pressure drilling than just surface back pressure. So within DGD, we have work that's done before a BOP is installed. And then once we start moving towards the reservoir, it's post BOP. Chevron and a few others back in the late 90s were heavily involved in seabed pumping systems for dual gradient. And Chevron's system was called the Max Lift. CAP-M was a Transocean effort. There's a Deep Vision effort. So there were frankly, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars put into dual gradient drilling at the seabed. sorry, this wasn't cap M. This is cap M, excuse me, the transocean with the dilution. The only current dual gradient system that I know of that's working in commercial and gaining traction is EDR's controlled mud level, EC drill, and we'll talk about that here coming up. To give everyone, just so we're rooted in what we're talking about, most of my presentation will be kind of focused to deep water, but we'll reference land probably when we get closer towards the end. So when we talk about conventional managed pressure drilling in deep water with a service back pressure system, you're looking just at this part alone here, probably $4 to $5 million worth of equipment. And then of course there's a surface system on top. So looking at this diagram here, conventional MPD, can you see my mouse?
I am not seeing the mouse. Oh, wait, now we are.
Well, that's because I shifted view. My media control should be coming in. Where is that?
There it is. I can see it.
You see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So conventional MPD, where you have your RCD, your annular and your spool, which is the riser joint is what we call it here. Everything from respect to the fluid is consistent and heterogeneous, homogeneous in the wellbore, same mud weight. The reason this is blued out is because this is no longer in existence, but this is what we were doing to explain what dual gradient seabed pumping systems look like. And you can see there's a lot of jewelry here on the bottom. And finally, we'll talk about EC drills, controlled mud level form of managed pressure drilling. And it's important to note here is the gap in the annulus. This is an air gap, and the mud level is here, and this pump is controlling that mud level. So some of you may or may not know about Chevron's efforts in subsea mud lift drilling. The project was concluded in 2017. It was not able to be commercial, frankly, for reliability reasons. All the drilling parameters that we set for it actually met and exceeded. But it was a tremendous effort. It was the first DGD drill ship on the Pacific Santa Ana. This was the original JIP team back in the 90s that developed the concept, and it wasn't just Chevron. There was Conoco, Texaco, Hydro, et cetera, that were putting this together. This was the early iteration of the pump. GE built with Hydro this subsea pump. And to give you a scale of how big it was, here's the installation on the Santa Ana in 2013, I believe it was. At the end of the day, the value proposition was to go from a wellbore that was smaller and consisted of a lot of steel to a little bit bigger, i.e. commercially bigger, so it could produce commercial quantities of oil, i.e. the well is productive, and could do it for less money, less cost. A lot of the motivation for this value driver, this benefit, was lost when we had the tragedy of Macondo, and the new regulations forced different well control regulations, and casing design points basically had to be a lot more stringent. So we were regulated back to more casings for protection reasons. But the 2014 crash didn't help, and again, as I mentioned earlier, reliability didn't help. But it's still a promising technology, and as we go deeper, eventually, then perhaps this technology will come back. Frankly, my money is on controlled mud level, and you'll see why here in a bit. So next topic is the use case for MPD, and I'm trying to show with this convoluted diagram up here that in deep water it is complicated. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of work that's required, pre-planning, feed studies, etc. Not to mention training and getting bridging documents aligned with drilling contractor, operator, and service company about how to manage this. So what is the use case for managed pressure drilling? Well, it's very attractive. Simply put, we have issues in the wellbore that can only be managed effectively with some sort of controlled pressure, i.e. managed pressure drilling process. So simplistically, when you look at your pressure profile, your operating window, which is your purple line, your pore pressure to your frac gradient, within that window, you can either be below the pore pressure, which is under balanced drilling. You can be conventionally overbalanced, the green part, or in the case of managed pressure drilling, you are trying to stay as near balanced and as close to pore pressure safely as you can, because as we know, this red line can start to come in much closer to pore pressure, and in some cases, like in karst, there is no line. So you have to go to a different form of drilling. Overbalance is not going to work. The practices, the principles, the equipment are, as I said, are mature. It is a child of well control, constant bottom hole pressure that we all learned. So the hydraulic dynamics are well understood and mature. And it's the drilling engineer's Swiss Army knife. So when he's encountering to the right here this wellbore pressure differential and what it can do to his well or his or her well, we can go from the left, which is a major kick or blowout, which is down here on our pore pressure side, or all the way to the right where we're actually fracking and we have major fluid losses. And in between are all the myriad of NPT problems that we're facing. Hole ballooning, and then breakouts and wellbore instability issues. NPD is well documented success history, case histories in all of these fields, and I encourage you, if you're wondering about it, you can go to One Petro and have more enough to read than you can imagine. Really good repertoire of case histories. So quickly, I'm just going to show you that the majors and that I've talked to, and even the independents have a good understanding of NPD. I believe that's contentious, maybe on the service side and maybe even the drilling contractor side, and not without some validity. But what I'm showing you here is just the next three slides are other people's approach, not just Chevron's, on how they think managed pressure drilling is going to help their portfolio. Here, Bill Meeks with Exxon presented Exxon's approach, and right now they're probably one of the highest profile managed pressure drilling operations going on in Guyana with Stena. Then there's Petrobras, who have done a lot of work in their deep water salt dome related reservoirs. They take a more academic and rigorous approach that has been very successful for them, and they have, from an operator point of view, my guess would be that they're probably the most mature with respect to what NPD can do for their portfolio, and they certainly apply it rigorously. Finally, here is neighbors. All right, so we will talk a little bit about land, and I particularly like this slide because it shows a drilling contractor or a service company approach that shows empathy for the operator, that they understand that the operator's job is to access the reservoir. The drilling environments are complex, and that NPD is one of the tools that can be applied that will make it successful for both neighbors and their customers. I'm not going to go through this entire slide here. I try to summarize the benefits of where Chevron believes NPD can help in its portfolio. The summary is in this block here, and I'm going to refer to this a couple more times. But the categories here: enabler, performance, reliability, safety, and well control, are ultimately summarized with these three value drivers. Steve spent a lot of time talking about NPT and focusing here. From an operator perspective, NPT is definitely important, no doubt. But there's a bigger vision too, particularly when you're talking about deep water and the amount of capex that's involved to develop reservoirs. And it's not just the NPT, it's how you access the reservoir. And depending on what the size of your reservoir is, you have to look for cost-effective ways to access it. And that the first one is, will you get that hole size to make it commercial? Is 8.5? Can you get an 8.5-inch wellbore? If you're down to 6-inch, you might have some issues. Would a lateral help, i.e. horizontal, or even an ERD type lateral, depending on the thickness of your reservoir and how you drill those laterals? You're trying to maximize your TLP or your platform. You want as many wells, as many wellbores as you can get. And so where does NPD play in all of this analysis? It plays a big part, and there is a rigorous approach to ensure NPD is the right solution. It may not always be. What I want you to pay attention to here is here's a portfolio looking at how NPD might be able to save a lot of money. And that's just days saved, but there's also issues, or let's say characteristics about NPD that can also help. What I call enabler are undrillable wells. Some of these wells may not be able to drill with conventional technology. If we're trying to extend drill centers with making them more productive, then ERD wells are a good way to go. And where can NPD help in that? And again, can we get a larger hole size? So these are wells that we're kind of drilling now, and the future portfolio through explorations has discovered deeper wells, maybe more problematic. And so we're looking at the technology across these 5 parameters to see if it fits. So summarizing, it's all about show me the money. Can the operator develop the assets profitably? NPD benefits are well documented. Operators who have these difficult wells are NPD knowledgeable, and they have a gate-driven process where NPD has to compete with alternate competitive solutions. But ultimately, is it going to enhance oil recovery? So even though NPD may be obvious for a lot of us, maybe it's not so obvious as that there's competing solutions out there. And that could be a whole different topic. I don't really have time to go into that part. I'm an NPD guy, so we'll stick with NPD. But there is alternates. So that leads into probably the biggest lament that's been in the industry since I've been with it, is why is it taking so long for NPD to be ubiquitous, to be on every rig? And I got a lot of questions, Dave, from your last show with Steve, and so I went and took some snippets from it, and hopefully you guys can see that. Tony kicked it off, and there's a lot of good comments in here, and I'm going to try to address the ones that Mike and Isabel Martin brought up, and I particularly liked Amy's because operators do track NPT, but we track it, but I'm not sure we know how we use it very well. One of my questions to any operator, including my employer, is, why isn't NPT on a profit and loss statement that we actually put it in the balance sheet or somewhere? It's a real hard number that we could publicize, make transparent, and then go try to attack. But to kick this section off, I'd like to just go to Tony's last comment here at almost a 2-hour mark. And he's asking, would it be fair to say the NPD reduces risk? And basically why, from an operator perspective, is NPD not considered the norm? Well, I think I touched on it a little bit, just briefly above about there's competition. But this section here will maybe talk about why it's not the norm a little better. So if none of you ever attended any IDC UBD UBO MPD conferences, I highly recommend you do them because they are effective. And you get a lot of information from it, and you actually hear from the horse's mouth. So there's one coming up in Denver. The slides that I'm going to show you here, some of them came from one we did in New Orleans 2 years ago. And we had a panel of drilling contractors, deepwater drilling contractors, including neighbors. And then, as I mentioned already, Exxon, Petrobras, and Lunden. And so I'm going to take some slides from that and kind of show you where the thinking was at the time 2 years ago and see if that resonates now.
Hey, Calvin, we do have a question.
Yeah.
So we have a question that come in from Zalaria, who's actually a avid watcher of the show. And so thank you so much for all of your help in promoting the show. In which category would you put multi-phase managed pressure drilling, or as it is known by low head drilling?
Multi-phase. Anything that's sort of two-phase, if you're calling it dilution, then that falls under dual gradient. But if that's a deep water term typically, although we are doing nitrified pressurized mud cap in Kazakhstan, Tengiz. So probably the way to go is to go to the IDC classification and try to classify it that way. But low head for me is dilution, and you're moving towards the underbalanced category. But as you can tell by my answer that there is no simple answer, and I'm not sure it's necessary. That you need to have the right answer.
Fair enough.
There's a correct one. So
yeah. Well, guys, if you guys do have any questions, please put them there in the comment section, and we will get them over to Calvin. Calvin, back to you, sir.
Okay. So in 2011, JPT put out a report on a survey that they had done of 600 members, and the question was, when is MPD going to be accepted fully amongst operators? Because at the time, 2011, it wasn't. And so we asked a question at the conference. Is our reputation in oil and gas as being slow to adopt technology justified? And the audience was overwhelmingly yes, it was. I'm on the fence about it because I think we have great examples of where we've gone forward without any prodding, and we always develop technologies for solutions or for problems where we can't access the reservoir. We've always done that. Otherwise, we'd be out of business. So I'm on the fence on that one. But the same audience also said, well, in 2011, we expect 5 years from now that all offshore wells would be about 40%, 33 to 43% of offshore wells will be using MPD in 5 years. And this is in 2011. Now, what was interesting and sort of a parallel current to MPD was there were no drilling contractors asked about that back in 2011. So when we asked the question at the conference, what out of the 2,800 offshore wells drilled in 2017, the best number we could come up wasn't 43, it wasn't 30, it was less than 5. It was like 80 wells is what we came up with. So, why is that? Is it because we're slow to accept technology? I don't know. I don't think so. So any marketing rep or business development rep worth his salt knows the product life cycle curve and the technology adoption life cycle there. You've read Crossing the Chasm. It was a fad for a while, and it still exists within our industry as we try to grapple with, why we're not accepting new technology. The big one right now is digitalization, that we're slow to the game and automation and AI and things like that. But I would argue that, as I said earlier, that the oil and gas industry is fit for purpose. When it's time, we do it. When we get prodded, we'll eventually do it. And, you don't develop these massive top drive systems on deep water rigs with 3 million hook load things without coming up with technology to handle that. Or in our case, the dual gradient subsea pump. So we can put when our minds to it, we can do moonshots. So going back to your earlier comment about Martin, he and I had some good discussions, along with Chris, about what is taking so long, and what are the issues. And Martin's quite passionate about it, and I agree with most of what he is frustrated about. And his number one thing is the knowledge gap, and that's primarily related to operators and their gap in understanding what NPD can do and how it should be applied. And rightly so. We have a lot of standards that Steve brought up in his meeting, the 92M, the 92S, the API 16. There's a lot of standards out there that dictate how, well, I say dictate, excuse me, recommended practices about how managed pressure drilling should be applied and planned. But a lot of the first four of what Martin brings up are what was in the audience and what we've heard a lot of: out of the comfort zone. We've always done it this way. And yes, they're valid, but I personally don't think it's the reason why it's taking so long. And I put that around quotation marks because I personally think NPD has arrived. And the next couple of slides will tell you why I think it's arrived. Number 5 is really where we're going to spend the next sort of rest of this section is the actual cost, the usefulness, if you will, the ease of use of NPD versus what it can actually do for you. So let me see if I can make the case that what I'm trying to do here is say that the NPD has arrived, that there is a chasm, but it's not because of knowledge gap. All right, it's because there's a perception problem. Usually when you talk about chasms, it's let's have a leap of faith. Let's just go try this new thing. And there's folks out there that will go try the new thing. As you all well know, that the risk involved in trying a new thing in oil and gas have certain consequences. So we're hamstrung just by the industry we're in and the risks that are involved. We just can't go off and do that. We're smart people, and we have to be comfortable that the technology is perceived as useful and easy to move forward. If it's not useful and it's not easy, then if you look at the right there, our behavioral intention to use this, our attitude is not going to be positive towards it. Okay. So the perception of usefulness here. So I mentioned already the usefulness, that it's an enabler, that we can do undrillable wells, so we can get into our ERD wells, long laterals. We can manage ECD. We can do wells that conventional wells can't do. How many of those are out there? Well, we'll see. Performance, we mentioned that, NPT avoidance. So the usefulness is there. Reliability. If my AFE for a well on land is, say, $2 million, and I'm consistently blowing over at 2.5 and 3 because of instability problems or what, then NPD can come along and make sure that my reliability, that I tell my boss I'll drill it for 2 million, will come in. And there's a lot of value there. NPD is a safety device. It adds additional early kick detection and can potentially be a barrier for that first influx that's not caught in time. And finally, and this is not where it's gone yet, but I do believe that if the economics are such that you're taking kicks, influxes on a regular basis on a deep water well and spending 24 hours to 72 hours trying to control it and just do basic driller's method, that an NPD system can cut that time exponentially. And these are all part of the customer's KPIs. So there's a strong use case for NPD, no doubt. But then there's the perception of how easy is it to use. And here's where I think we have some work to do. This is a riser joint going out to a deep water rig. And as impressive as it is, it's also a bit intimidating, right? It's not exactly the easiest thing to rig up and put together and make sure it all works. So ease of use involves, is it efficient? it mistake tolerant, error tolerant? Is it easy to learn? Is it effective in what it does? And is it engaging? So engaging is probably more consumer related, but you have to be excited about wanting to do this. Error tolerance versus benefits. So this is for the entire group: service company, operator, and drilling contractor. So Martin, going back to Martin's point about knowledge gap, which is valid, is, you know, where does anyone who's interested in MPD go to get guidance? And, you know, shame on you if you haven't gone to the committee page and pulled down these references. They're available. Your service company has them. If the service company doesn't have them, then, you know, turn around or hang up the phone, because they're not serious. And it's, in my opinion, it's the service company's job to make sure that the operator and the drilling contractor are at least aware of them. All right, that's a minimum. We have competency issues in our business of MPD, and yes, we have it because we're not looking at guidance documents, so we're not knowledgeable, we're not competent in recommended practices. But we also have competency issues on the service side and within the training, and the IDC is working on that. They've been working on it in a while, and I'm hopeful that a curriculum is going to come out. But, you know, my own personal experience, which is kind of summed up here in a presentation I did a couple years ago, was about how, as much as we talk about early kick detection for MPD, we can still miss it. And that diagram there is just a brief example, or a short example, of how we had an 8-minute warning, but we still didn't pick up the fact that a kick was coming. And so we took a kick. And I've been talking to a few of my colleagues over the past month or two, and just recently, and we continue to have well control incidents with managed pressure drilling. And that's what I'm trying to show here with the folks, Solvik and Luis, asking about, you know, is it possible that if MPD is not used correctly, can it take a kick? And the answer is yes, it can. MPD is not a silver bullet, okay? It is not going to replace well control. And this goes back to complacency, right? So, hey, I got MPD out there. I got Coriolis. I can sleep well at night. I know the MPD guy, he's going to take care of me. Well, if you're thinking like that, then you're asking for problems. Another competency issue is, and probably one of the bigger ones, at least that I see, is this idea of project management not being as rigorous as it could be. Sales versus the engineering versus operations. And there has to be, all the parties have to be involved, right? Sales sort of sets expectations, engineering designs to those expectations, but invariably ops is usually left out until it's time to go do it. And I can speak from experience that I've been out in the field, and the operations team had no idea what was planned in the office and what the drilling program was going to be, and that was disappointing. Pressure well drilling is nice, but it's not necessary. A lot of MPD, particularly in the shale wells, are being done without PWD. They can't afford PWD. PWD is expensive, so you don't always need to do it. But on the more complex wells, then it is actually, you would call it necessary. And the HPHT stuff, the narrow margin stuff. And my last point is on the simulator, that simulators are good and bad. I like simulators, but if you need a simulator to train your team, then it's not, that doesn't mean it's easy, right? You just have to acknowledge that spending the extra time and it's all necessary, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't say that MPD is easy. So it goes back to the ease of use. Okay. Finishing up here, this was just sort of the audience's perception of where the challenges lied with MPD. And this is summarized back to 2011. Those same ones I showed you are kind of summarized here, right? So the blue one is the operators believe it's hard to justify the cost. Maybe the benefits aren't fully articulated. I contend that the reason the operators believe it's hard to justify the cost is because it is expensive. There are alternates, and NPD doesn't always win. Let's hear from the drilling contractors on the deep water side. I'll kind of shoot through this. This is again from the conference. And again, this is not just Diamond's point of view. This was shared across the rest of the participants, Seadrill and Maersk. And not to the same extent Neighbors, because they were land, but I'm sure Neighbors would agree with some of this stuff relatively. So we see the things like high cost of equipment, that there is different versions of NPD, even within surface back pressure, that have created problems. Some actually hampering the surface back pressure system because too much back pressure was designed into the actual friction of the surface system, which was difficult. Complex and cumbersome in the moon pool. 2 days to put a NPD package in the water and start drilling is okay, prices have come down, but back in the day, you could say $2 million. That's a lot of money. Seadrill quoting the same thing. Surface back pressure is too high. Bad design. I like to think that's gone away now. It's a recognized problem, but initially when it got going, there was a lot of bad press about that. High running costs and insufficient use during well construction to justify the cost. And I think that's a valid comment that may be a bit of a hidden or not well discussed part. And my 2 cents on it is controlled mud level may help with that. But progress is being made. The NPD integrated joint is now simplified and reduced the rig up time. Still expensive, but hey, it's an improvement. But at the end of the day, it's still very expensive to outfit a deep water rig with it. There's some frustration about when you want a deep water rig, how NPD ready is it? Is it equipped? Is it ready? Is it capable? It causes some confusion between both parties, but it's just one of the reasons why it's complicated. And NPD is starting to show up in tenders, but according to Diamond, they don't want to pay for it. Again, this is 2 years ago, and I think you'll see a change in that thinking. So in conclusion, when you talk about a chasm, it's a collective group. It's not just, the end user, the customer not accepting it or being reluctant. I'll take a break here if you want, Dave, before I move on to the future part. I'm probably about 3/4 way through.
No worries. Yeah. So we did have, we actually had somebody request that I picked their question. So we had Andy. Hi, Calvin. Do you think the OEM DNV GL, and Andy, thank you so much for speaking in alphabet soup, compliant will be mandatory, especially for deep water managed pressure drilling equipment? David, thanks to pick this question. Guys, if you do ask any questions, try not to use too many of the acronyms. I know it'll probably make things a little bit worded longer, but not all of us are managed pressure drilling experts. And, like I'm an MWD guy, so I don't know what all the acronyms mean. So it's kind of hard to know exactly what you are asking. And there's probably some other people who don't know either. So,
well, to be fair,
I understand it is, but
that's not NPD. That's not NPD's fault. That, the DNV, ABS, these are the classification bodies for ships, not just oil and not just drilling ships, but any kind of maritime vessel needs a certification. And so the NPD notations were added probably, 10 years when it first started. Short answer, will it be mandatory? Operators, and we all hate that word. We hate regulation. We hate being told that something needs to be done. My guess is unless it's an insurance requirement, operators don't really have much skin in the game. But I do know as a drilling engineer, if I see that notation, then I'm comforted and I appreciate that the supplier has gone through the effort. So I'm going to be biased towards choosing them than I would somebody that doesn't have it, just naturally. There's a big price tag with that, though, right? There's an annual price tag for that notification. So the drill ship owner has got to get a return on that. And he has to expect, so either he's going to get that in his day rate or some way back. So mandatory means the drill ship guy's got to pay for it, and they don't want it to be mandatory. So that's the best I can answer that one.
Alrighty. We had the question, David, what is MWD? Money wasted downhole. There you go. We do have Tony Reed has the question, how much does MPD reduce overall risk compared to conventional drilling methods? Are DWAPs MPD still conducted prior to the drilling campaign commencing? Tony, thank you so much for your comment. And I don't know if you saw this, Tony, but you were highlighted in part of Calvin's presentation there.
So there was a paper done, I believe, by Weatherford and Robert Ziegler about, with I think Don Hannigan, about the reduction in risk for blowouts using MPD. It was a bit of a contentious paper, but I applaud them for trying that and moving into the well control space. I believe that anybody that's doing exploration work, I would always want an MPD system out there. That part I could see happening all the time and should happen all the time. It is safer. Actual percentage numbers, that's sort of Bessie regulatory talk. And after Macondo, there was an effort to insist that Coriolis flow meters were going to be, ubiquitous on every offshore thing. And the industry fought that hard, and rightly so, because at the end of the day, I personally believe it's human factors. I know it's a cliche almost nowadays, which is a shame. It's a long-winded answer to say I don't have a number, but gut and intuitively, yes, MPD is safer if applied right.
So next one from Carlos. Do you not see new subsea pump development to make subsea mud lift successful? Carlos, thank you for your question.
Oh, Carlos. I'm going to have to pass on that. Short answer is right now at $40 oil. No way. I would tip my hat to Shell to see what they thought. I think they would probably say not right now, and that's because they've moved to controlled mud level with EDR. And again, I think controlled mud level is the future.
So here's a great question. So this is from John DeWard, who
hi, John.
John is one of the people that's very active in SPE and has actually been on the Vidor Locksmith show in the past when we were doing just typical interview stuff. So John asked, has the industry failed to create a justifiable value proposition? And this kind of goes with, we've had some other comments and questions in there about, saying, it's hard to be able to justify the cost for something beforehand if you don't know the performance and these kinds of things. So this is a great question that covers a lot of kind of comments and questions that have been in the comments so far.
I think, well, yeah. In fact, John, your podcast or webinar with Dave is on my list to do. I don't have time, but I'll do it this weekend. I think to answer your question, the short answer is no, we haven't, and I don't think we ever can. First of all, there's too much difference within drilling, right? You can't just say MPD on every drilling rig. You can't do that. I don't believe. Now, unless all of a sudden we start having tons of well control incidents, we're going to be out of business anyway. And MPD is not going to help. Will MPD save us from another disaster? Yeah, higher than conventional, sure. But no, I don't believe we've done a justifiable. We have a justified value proposition, because it's not simple, as you well know. It's not simple like horizontal wells and directional drilling, or again, I use top drive as an example. We've been at this game too long, right? It's coming on. Well, 1967 is the first time when I was doing some patent research, I saw Humble Oil trying it through the BOP, through the annular. So no, I don't think you will. Next
question is from Jonathan Hernandez Mercado. How is it's the automated drilling getting related with managed pressure drilling. So I think like if we could have John and Calvin like combined into one to answer that one would be great.
Well, I've got a section coming up. In fact, that's at the end of this future section that we'll talk about that.
Excellent.
But hold on.
I know we've got a handful more questions in here. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with some of these here, you guys. So you have, in May of 2020, former SLB CEO Andrew Gould said technology prices go through a curve. Oh, you guys are commenting too fast. Now I can't read it. All right. It goes through a curve, and it's on the other part of the screen. I'm trying to read it from the wrong spot. A curve that depends on utilization. The more you use it, the faster it becomes cheaper. Why are we not there yet?
Okay, well, great comment. And so on land, in U.S. land, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't have the latest numbers, but before the rig count imploded, there's like 700 rigs land, right? And as I recall, there was at least 500 rigs supposedly that had some RCD out there. And it has been that way for a decade. That the Weatherford, Pruitt's, sorry, I can't remember all the other names, but there's a lot of rotating control head folks out there that have a great rental business, and they're on the rigs. Are they using for MPD? No, not because all of them have chokes. But again, I'm at the risk of repeating myself. MPD is mature. It's been out there. And it is case by case. It is still case by case in terms of does it fit an operator's needs. The only way it's going to be out on every rig is when the drilling contractors take it over like they do a top drive. And I believe that's the future.
Excellent. Well, guys, if you would please tag a friend, tag a peer, tag somebody in the comment section. Let them know what we're talking about today. Maybe they can get a little bit of education on this. I'll let you go ahead and continue, Calvin, because I know you've got some more stuff to be able to cover in here. And guys, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to keep putting them there in the comment section, but we'll try to get through everything as we continue rolling through the show. So I'm going to click.
Okay.
There we go. Whoops. Going to take that off. And it's all you, sir.
All right. So Juan wanted to, and maybe Tony to some extent, was what's the future of MPD? I'm not going to touch on UBD. As I said, it's already out. So controlled mud level. Carlos brought that question up. What is the future? So you've already, my bias towards it. Lundin has very successful, well-publicized paper on their application of using controlled mud level in the Barents Sea. Now they had severe losses with well control incidents drilling these karst carbonate formations, which is well known application also in Asia, where Steve and Ken did a lot of pressurized mud cap with Shell, and in fact Ziegler was one of those guys too that brought pressurized mud cap to the forefront. But controlled mud level is a different animal, and it was used very successfully in harsh conditions on a floater under strict guidelines in a very environmentally sensitive area. So here's a application of new technology, a new way of doing managed pressure drilling, dual gradient, and doing it successfully. What is controlled mud level drilling? It's as simple as it gets, and that's why I love it, and that's why I think it's the future. You have a pump attached to the riser, and all that pump does is control this level of mud up and down. And as you know, when you control the mud level, the height of that mud level determines what the bottom hole pressure is seeing. So you, just like a choke, adding 200 or 300 PSI at surface, which is what you get here, or more, 700 or 1,000, whatever you're at, you do the equivalent by just adjusting this fluid level. Where for me it's superior is that if you're with the choke and you're applying your pressure profile, you're staying within your pressure profile, but all of a sudden that pressure profile blows out and your frac gradient goes to zero, and you now are in a lost circulation method. Your choke is useless. It can't help you. With CML, though, on the other hand, you just reduce this level of fluid to where you regain some form of control back to drilling, or you move towards a mud cap where you're injecting fluid to keep that riser annulus full. So Enhanced Drilling has been at it for a while. In fact, they were partners with us on the dual gradient project. And just recently, I heard in the IDC committee, Roger Van Ort and his team with EDR on the Pontus have got a full well program in the Gulf with this. So I'm kudos to them for moving forward with it, and very excited to hear how that comes about. And I would ask any drilling contractor to pay close attention to what's happening out there before they make a decision on surface back pressure systems. So another issue coming up in Rig Up, and it's not just land, I mean, not just deep water, it is on land, but Weatherford's done a great job in exponentially reducing the rig up time with their robotic hookup of the riser joint in the moon pool. And so we're going from a day of hooking up this complicated, or 2 days, down to maybe half a day. And in this case, what you're seeing here is probably half an hour just hooking it up. So a lot of time saved in rig up time. Another technology that Weatherford has that I don't believe is used as common anymore, and I'd like to know why, but at one point it was really very common. And this is the downhole deployment valve. Think of it as a safety valve, but it's in 7-inch and 9 5/8 casing sizes. And so in effect, you turn your casing into a huge lubricator. And when you're worried about tripping, and you have to roll over muds to get to kill weight mud, that takes a lot of time. In this case, the DDV, you don't have to do that. Now, of course, this thing needs control cables, and on deep water rigs, it's not practical, but on land it is. And if folks really want to learn more about the value of MPD, I recommend going to YouTube and watching this value of MPD by Mr. Patel. They've done a good job of summarizing what's going on there. Another exciting technology that's now become, well, not quite mature, but it's certainly commercial and very successful and out on some very high-profile wells is AF Global's active control device. Steve mentioned in his RCD presentation that the original, what we called an RBOP, rotating BOP, or RCH, rotating control head, was an active system. And Steve and I have a lot of scars and blood, sweat, and tears with a project we did in Indonesia with Kufpek, where we had an old Varco active pressure system, and it was a monster. It was finicky, and basically we eventually made it obsolete and gas axed it, and went with the Williams RCD, which is very effective. But now actives come back, and for good reason. In my opinion, it's superior for two reasons. Number one is it's active, so it senses the well, and you've got an active seal at all times. So there's a certain comfort there. There's no bearing assembly to fail or manage or to redress. But from a performance point of view, it's superior substantially with respect to how you need to use managed pressure drilling and what your operating window allows. So we all talk about the static well. It's good for 2,000 PSI and 1,500 PSI dynamic, but the part that doesn't get talked enough about is the fact that, and this is, Dave, what you and I talked about yesterday or a couple of days ago, was in the directional world, and the RPMs required on the drill string are very high. It's no longer in the 80 to 100. We're in the 200, 160 range now. And unfortunately, the RCD, the passive system's performance drops remarkably compared to active. So you've got a better performance indicator. And then on top of that, because it's active, how it's wearing. And if it's starting to wear out, you can do something and plan for it, as opposed to get surprised and have to react. Continuous circulation method. Just briefly, this is one Brian brought up, which I was glad to see. He kind of created a little kerfuffle on the chat when he mentioned that connections take 25 to 35 minutes with MPD, and a lot of people were like, "Well, what are you talking about? No way. It should be like 4 minutes." But then he mentioned that he was working with continuous circulation subs, and so I was really happy to see that. I'm glad to see that there's work being done there, because this is the most effective form and simplest form of managed pressure drilling that you can do, and it's primarily used for eliminating pressure spikes. So one of the problems with wellbore stability or windows is when you turn the pumps on and off, you can create flexing in the well, and you have ballooning issues and all kinds of problems depending on how narrow the window is and what kind of well you got. And these subs are built so that you never have to stop. You never remove your equivalent circulating density on the well. So your total pressure is always kept going because you're always pumping through these valves. So when you make a connection, you're pumping through this sub, while above it you're pulling your other joint, or you're pulling this one out. So it's continuous circulation at all times. It's good for ERD wells, managing ECD, and also if you've got barite sagging problems, which are common in these complex wells, then the circulation subs allow you to mitigate that problem. And there's, Halliburton's at E&I. The Italians developed it initially, and I think Adriel Tech has a solution. Halliburton had the other one. I don't know which one Brian was familiar with. DrillMech at one point had one. Weatherford has a system. I don't know if it's commercial, but it's out there, and I recommend folks that are looking for a cost to really understand what your well needs. You don't always have to have a choke and a flow meter. So going lastly on the digitalization part, before Chevron shut down its Marcellus gas unit, which I was a part of, we had Precision out there, and we had the Novos system, and I'm very impressed with it. It is definitely the future for drilling contractors. I mean, H&P has their own. I'm sure Neighbors is developing one, but Novos is doing a great job of sort of illustrating the future of where they're going. In fact, a couple of days ago, Rig of the Future had NOV out there showing the robotics actually making connections with robots. So it's quite fascinating to see the automation coming. What's important here is that right now MPD sits out here with MWD and the Mudlogger and other ones. It has its own system. We put quotation marks around integration, and it's being interfaced into the system, so the driller has another screen. The future is that MPD is built in and fully integrated, and it's not a separate screen. And I'm glad John's on. He hooked me up to the DSA roadmap, which he's a big, he was not only a cheerleader, but one of the leaders developing our industry's, trying to get our industry aligned and develop a methodology of how we approach automation. And so I highly recommend anybody and everybody on this call to read it if you really want to know where we're going. And I use it a lot in what I'm doing right now. Novus, this is not proprietary. This is stuff they put out where they're trying to go. So you can see a lot of applications, or let's say work processes or drilling processes that's on their ramp up schedule for building into Novus. And of course, here's the advanced MPD. Now, I would take issue with the word advanced. It's all relative. I mean, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, we'll probably laugh at what they're trying to do with MPD now. But it's still automation, and, hats off to them for having that in the deal. Where we're not yet, and where I believe we're going, is that when MPD is integrated into the driller's chair, the drilling engineer is going to take his drilling program, and by well section and segment it into depths depending on what formation issues we're seeing, instability or easy drilling. We're going to be able to plug that into their planning app, and the machine, the robotic machine, will have these parameters built in and drill to those parameters under the supervision of the driller and the drilling engineer. So a lot less human intervention and a lot better chance of understanding what our baseline is, and then developing lessons learned when we go off path. At least we can tune it because we knew what was in the program in the first place, and we knew it was followed. The business model, I took this from Exxon. So we're in a rough situation right now. People are asking why it's not, why MPD is not more, why it's not being used more. And Bill's comment here at the bottom, convention becomes convention because it works. This is what I was saying earlier in the use case. If we don't have a problem, then we're okay. Drilling contractors now are front and center in terms of MPD, where 10 years ago they weren't even on the list for an opinion. Now, I think it's fairly certain that the drilling contractor is going to become the largest player in it, frankly, because it makes their rig competitive. They have three ways to do it. They purchase outright, they can lease it, or they lease purchase, and depending on what the market conditions are, then that will dictate. I don't have a definitive answer. It just depends on where you're at in time and place. My questions really are for the service industry out there. Is the drilling contractors take it on more? What does that do to them? How do they play a role? And, everybody talks about deep water, but, it's a limited market, right? There's only so many systems and so many rigs out there doing it. So, yeah, it's big dollars, but they're going to be fighting for table scraps here pretty soon. And in this market, it's even rougher. So I don't have an answer for it, and I didn't really mean to spend much time on it, but maybe that's a panel discussion for something you want to do, Dave, down the road. So I'll just lose the last one. Is MPD going to get bigger? What's the current state? Steve showed a slide of 51 rigs. This was 2 years ago, and WoodMac was doing a very commendable effort trying to understand what the market was. At the time, 64% of the rigs, deepwater rigs, did not have MPD. And you can see here, we're kind of saying, well, is it MPD capable or MPD ready? What does that mean? That goes to one of the problems. But at the end of the day, there's still a large amount of rigs that didn't have it. That's changing now. That's definitely changing, and the deepwater rigs and land rigs are starting to look at it more seriously. But it's still a finite market, right, guys? I mean, it's a finite market of 162 rigs, and it's probably a lot less now. Ben with Maersk noted an uptick in tenders that MPD was being asked on deepwater rigs, and I think that continued up until basically March when COVID showed up. I just want to show here that there's a lot to put on MPD. This is why it's complicated. You could look at directional drilling and kind of make suggestions about how it's the same. But there's a lot of people involved in all this process, and top drives and directional aren't near as complicated. Lastly, case history from Schlumberger and Stena for the work that they did, that the integrated solution is commercial, it's working, and they're having a lot of success with it. It is definitely an enabler for their Guyana mega discovery. So that's it, gang. We made it. Sorry, maybe it took a little bit longer than I thought, but hopefully it was interesting to you guys. Hopefully I made the point that MPD's arrived. It's complicated. There's a lot of future R&D, future to be had, new products coming, new innovations, and it's a very exciting, interesting technology. We saw a lot was going on with SpaceX and space travel, and the slide here on the right is showing the initial cost of the shuttle and where we're down to now. And I would draw the same analogy for our industry that we're doing the same thing, and it just takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's complicated, but we'll get there, and just accept the status quo as it is, but keep innovating. It's kind of a contradiction in terms, but welcome to managed pressure drilling. So with that, I'll thank you for your time, and I have some.
All right, Calvin, thank you so much. So the first question I want to be able to throw in here, I think, is a great question. Maria says, what does artificial intelligence have to be able to contribute to managed pressure drilling?
Well, artificial intelligence has been around for, that's a 40-year-old, 50-year-old term. It was originally around in expert systems, using sort of Bayesian techniques, case-based reasoning, to try to come up with ways to support the drilling team with scenarios, and then how do you handle those scenarios? I think it's a great question. That is really, when we say artificial intelligence, is moving towards machine learning, and that's what Novos may be moving towards. I would just say that it's probably premature right now. That we've got so many fundamental issues that I brought up, sort of error tolerant, that I don't think AI is going to help too much in that space when you talk about project management or competency and training. Yeah, you could argue that let the robot do it and get the MPD engineer out of the way. It's coming, but I don't see it. I don't see it right now. We still don't even have artificial intelligence in basic drilling, directional, etc.
Very true. And if you guys are interested in any of this stuff related to artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things within oil and gas, the last episode of July, I think it's July 31st, we're going to have the IBM team come on and do a full educational presentation on those items. So be sure to tune into that one. So the next one is from Carlos. If I compare choke reaction versus subsea pump in controlled mud level, are we talking about the same reaction time?
No. Well, I mean, it's a pressure transient, right? So the choke's on a rig, on service on the rig. So there's the pressure transient time for it to travel. So I would say it's the same. I don't think it's a factor. I would ask the control level guys to follow. It's a good question, but I would say that it's not a factor. It's the same. It's not a reason not to use controlled mud level. It's the same as
Okay.
it's a 600-700 horsepower, maybe 1,000 horsepower motor on those pumps. So, or total combined, how many, depending on what they have. So it can react very quickly and handle it.
Excellent. So this one's from Jose. From an operator point of view, how does the industry move from evaluating managed pressure drilling only by how much it increases operations daily costs to better understanding the benefits and its impact beyond just the drilling stage?
Well, IDC back in the beginning, had a MPD candidate selection tool, and I know on LinkedIn there's a few folks out there offering, let's say, consulting services on how to use MPD to benefit your well. How does an operator? How do I personally? How do drilling engineers do it? Well, we know who the MPD players are, so we ask for case histories. We ask around within our peers, right? We have the committee. Do we do a good job of doing case history publication? Well, we could probably do better, but I don't know, Jose, when you ask that question, if you think that's the root of the problem on again, knowledge gap, maybe operators don't get it. I think unless somebody's bringing compelling and waving the flag saying, look how much time we've saved, then each one's case specific. Again, this has been 20 years now. So I don't think operators are unknowledgeable. I'm maybe a contentious one, maybe because I'm on the operator side now, but okay, I'll tell you what. So when I talk to let's say my contemporaries on the operator side, and Chris was service company, he was well control before, now he's BP, and Martin was Shell, and now he's on the. So it's it's to say I'm an operator, I'm really more of a service company guy. We know what MPD can do. But trying to sell that internally to a drilling engineer who's in charge of an asset, it takes a while. And we have, like I said, we've got a rigorous gate process. It's not just something, hey, let's go rig it up on a deep water rig or even on a land rig. You've got to dot your I's and cross your T's and work through the process. That's why engineers are required to be technical salespeople as well too.
Next question. So Yusuf put this both on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So thanks for watching on both channels, bumping up the numbers there. We are known as drilling for production, but as I can see, we are drilling to frack. Thus, the use of conventional drilling. What needs to be done to readjust to basic objective drilling for production? I will do a quick plug because I am on the board of directors of the IADD. We did a actual webinar series about this one yesterday. I don't know if you can still go back and watch, but I think that at least they put up maybe some of the PowerPoints, and there's some review of that material yesterday, which the whole thing was called drilling for production. So,
well, Dave, then expand a little bit, because I may have a different expectation of what drilling for production means versus fracking. In a sense of being able to correlate what you're doing on the drilling side to enhance production, instead of just drilling to put down the fastest well, but putting down a high quality well that produces more oil. Because I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's what we're trying to do. And I do think that the industry is becoming more aware of that. And, especially on the drilling side, if you can correlate what you do on the drilling side, whether you're a service company, technology provider, something of that nature, if you can be able to justify and somehow correlate what you have to offer at the drilling stage actually increases production, then the value proposition for your equipment, I think you could either charge higher prices, get a little bit more of a premium, or at least be able to get a larger market share of the work that's out there. So I think it's kind of one of those sales techniques things, but it also, it makes sense, and it's definitely the direction to go. So from my IADD pet and soapbox, there it is. Well, so, UBD was the father of NPD, and UBD was all about drilling for production. And so we were actually doing reservoir characterization while we were drilling the laterals. And again, hats off to the Canadians and Shell for illustrating a lot of that stuff. So we were definitely drilling for production, drilling for the sweet spots. And we were just developing sort of pressure transient signature curves to try to and relate that to lithology, trying to say, okay, where's the sweet spot? So, but you don't do that in shale. You can't do that in shale, right? The skin damage that drilling is doing is negated by these massive fracks. So in U.S. land, where 90% of the work is done on shale, I'm not quite sure how you drill for production if you're doing a vertical well, but I don't see it. International, absolutely near balanced, avoiding skin damage. But then you have to go to your completion people and say, how bad am I messing up your completion? And they'll come back and tell you, well, we got these horrible skins, no negatives, it's positive, it's out of the wall. What are you doing? So then you could look at NPD and say, well, okay, maybe that's a near balanced approach, less near wellbore damage is the way to go. But UBD is not a panacea either. We were in a couple of cases. It's a bit like kit control and NPD. Does UBD fix every well? No. And if you don't manage your pressure properly and you get pressure spikes during connections in UBD, you can do a lot of damage to a virgin reservoir. So you have to be careful.
Excellent. So the next one's from Wilson. What do you think about the use of managed pressure drilling when we drill wells with hole stability problems?
Yeah, that was a question that I had tagged for Amy Fox on, which was another good one. And she asked some good questions on NPD too. So, and I think Vanderstack and a few of the guys out there have mentioned that wellbore stability problems is in NPD surface back pressure's wheelhouse, and even you could say continuous circulation, without a doubt. If you remember my bullet at the very beginning, it's I think the quote's attributed to Van Noort, but somebody in Shell said that I love NPD because it's 100 or 1,000 mud weights in my pocket. So you have that, because of the choke, you have that ability determine your window. You can frack it a little bit, and you can let it flow a little bit. And now you know where your window is at that moment in time. And if you start to see cavings, then okay, you need to apply more pressure. So it gives you that instantaneous feedback. And in HPHT wells, the MPD is one of the standard tools to use for wellbore stability problems. And there's a ton of case of histories out there. You really need to go, just type that in one Petro and you'll find a ton. Shouldn't have any problem convincing your boss that MPD will help you with wellbore stability problems. If you do, you need to change companies because you're not going to have much fun.
The truth. What is the next step for, and this is from Carlos Nunez. Carlos is always active in the comment section, getting all the questions in there. What is the next step for controlled mud level? The fact that we circulate well control conventionally, it limits the extension of casing shoe.
Well, I'm not quite sure I follow the limits the extension of the casing shoe. Because CML is dual gradient, and dual gradient is all about extending casing shoes. And I showed in that slide on the Chevron subsea mud lift system that the amount of, I think it was like 11 or 12 casings down to maybe 7. So we are extending casing shoes and running very long 16-inch casing. So CML, I don't understand how you think that limits the casing shoe. And all I would say is for the next step, it's happening right now with Shell on the Pontus in the Gulf. I'm eagerly waiting to hear how it works. And I like I said, Carlos, I think it's the future. So I don't see it limiting. I see it the opposite, actually. I could be wrong, but I don't see what I'm missing.
All right. I'm trying to make sure I get through all of the questions here. Okay. We're hitting a little bit of a slow spot as far as some of the questions here. Question: Are we bypassing managed pressure drilling when evacuating an influx from a well? I heard with this technology we can kill a well at 90 strokes per minute, or even continue drilling, and the system will do it itself. Yeah. How true is that? Yeah.
No, that's a great question. So 9 times out of 10, if you're new to MPD, when you take a kick, you're shutting in the well, and you're going to handle it conventionally, going off your operations matrix. But as you get comfortable with it, then yes, you can start to let the MPD system circulate out the kick. In dual gradient drilling, when you increase the pump rate or keep the pump rate constant, you are in effect using your ECD to try to kill the well. And so in our dual gradient subsea pumping, that's what we would do. We would keep the pump going because we already have pressure on the well. So why lose it and make the kick bigger, right? So it is absolutely true that physically, theoretically, you can do it. I don't know anybody who has increased pumps to kill a well other than Wild Well Control and Boots and Coots and those guys.
All right. So here's another one. Hi, Calvin. So it's from Eddie again. How many people call managed pressure drilling automated managed pressure drilling, but in reality, they still rely to human, even to do simple thing like managed pressure drilling connection? Do we have any definition by IADC for fully automated managed pressure drilling?
Oh, hey, Andy. Good to hear from you. No, I don't. You're asking definition questions again. I would say that the short answer is no, there is no definition. You're right. It's automated as in the eye of the beholder. I would think that the only people that maybe have true ones would be Neighbors with their integrated system on their own rigs. Stena maybe with Schlumberger fully integrated in the panel. I know that within the service companies, there's emotion around that question. Is it really integrated versus fully integrated? I would just say don't get too fixated on automation right now, guys. We're still wanting to prove that that it can actually solve problems. And I don't think automation is something we really need to be focusing on, unless you really think it can reduce cost or some error that we're making all the time. Speaking of errors, I had a question that I wanted to bring up.
Go for it.
Last week, 2 weeks ago, somebody had a question about the standpipe pressure increase when you increase pressure on the choke, on the annulus. And it's a good fundamental, well control question. And the short answer is yes. So, it's constant bottom hole pressure. So when you're applying pressure, you see that through the entire system, not only downhole, but it translates back up hole to standpipe pressure. So what I saw, Ansif, is that we have, if I ask that to an MPD engineer from some service companies, they would ask that question, and that would be very disappointing. An MPD professional should know that. And I'm not saying you're an MPD professional. I'm not even saying you don't know the answer. I'm just saying that you struck a chord with me with that question, because I had people on the rig that didn't know the answer to that and really what ECD meant, which is a problem.
If you want to go for
the
other ones that you've got up there, I've got them up on the screen, so go for it.
Okay, what is the practice we should follow if the drill string gets stuck with no circulation? So this will go back to Martin's and Chris's complaint. MPD is not a silver bullet. You can't blame this on MPD. I mean, if you got stuck because of wellbore instability and you had MPD out there, that would be embarrassing for MPD folks, I guess. But once you're stuck, you're stuck. Okay. And so, yeah, that's a short one for that one. I think we already talked about
jars.
Huh?
I said fire the jars.
Yeah. And good luck with that. The other questions were touched on. Somebody asked about formation damage and MPD, and then and Amy's question about managing borehole instability. So, I'm not surprised the questions are petering out, because you had a lot of good ones there.
We did have one. I've got another one up here. How reliable is the echometer? I'm not even sure how to pronounce that one. Any limitations for hole angle?
Well, first of all, the echometer is very reliable. We had a form of it. It escapes me, when we were trying to determine bottom hole pressure, or pressure at our SRD valve, our SRD. I'm not quite sure how it applies to manage pressure drilling. I don't think I've ever related to it, unless you're using it for pressurized mud cap and you want to know where the level is. Maybe that's where you're coming from, Johnny. Probably what it is. I haven't heard any complaints with it. It's cheap and it's simple, and you don't need a whole lot of resolution, i.e. accuracy, in pressurized mud cap. Frankly, any drilling, unless it's just super, you're talking about 50 psi windows kind of stuff. So I would say the echometer is fine. In terms of hole angle, well, yeah, eventually, I don't know that number specifically, but at some point, it's not going to be able to find, let's say, levels that are below horizontal. But then you've got an issue. You've got another issue if you can't determine if you're horizontal and lost circulation.
So here's another one for you. It says LinkedIn user, but it's from Scott McNeil, who's been joining several of these sessions. At the start, Calvin said he would like to see managed pressure drilling on every exploration well. How would you justify the upfront cost to management if you don't have enough, if any, offset information to give them hard numbers? Yeah.
Well, the way I've seen it done is you basically, it's your reputation within the, let's say, the operating company. If you've got experience and got burnt without it, and then you had the success with it, then you convince the rest of the team. If people asking what are the hard numbers to show risk mitigation, and I mentioned Robert Ziegler and Don Hannigan's paper on going to risk reduction. But you're right, Scott, it's not enough. If it was, everybody would be doing it, or we'd ask Bessie to regulate it and put it out there, right? So I believe that the future is the drilling contractors are going to have it out there. May take a long time, but if you have an expert well and you don't have any analogs and there's no problems, then yeah, why are you going to put it out there if it's going to cost you $50,000-$60,000 a day or more on a rig? That's a lot of money. And it's not a knowledge gap. It's not a chasm gap. It's not a knowledge gap.
Well, I think that kind of rounds it out. We haven't seen any other questions. So if you've got one more that you would like to be able to address there, go for it. We'll put up there. It says, thanks, Calvin.
Well, I appreciate it.
And also saying thanks.
Okay. I don't have any more questions.
Go for it.
All I had was just if anybody wanted to stick around for Cigna Dennis Moore's animated illustration of applying surface back pressure. It's not a cartoon. It's just an instructional way of how the pressure is applied for those that don't know, much about surface back pressure.
Go for it.
Okay, go for it. I'll go for it. All right. So again, I'd like to refer everybody to go to IDC, and you can pick up all these terms, and different managed pressure drilling terms are in the definitions. So here we're talking about constant bottom hole pressure, where we're not allowing the pressure to fluctuate because we are compensating for the loss of the annulus friction pressure when the pumps are off. And we are doing that typically with the choke, but as I mentioned, we can also do it with the continuous circulation valves. And we're doing it we're doing it to mitigate these problems. And it's a very simple, well-controlled principle that you apply back pressure when the ECD is lost, and you want to stay within a window. One thing to note is that you can change that pressure at one single point. It doesn't necessarily always have to be at bottom hole pressure, right? If depending on zones that you're going through, you may want to hold a pressure constant. It's something you've already drilled that may be either higher or lower pressure depending on the situation. As I mentioned, CCS you never lose your ECD when the pumps are off because you continue to circulate the entire well. And the whole job is to extend casing strings and to extend these casing points. Less casing means cheaper wells. So yes, there's uncertainty in exploration wells. You don't know what the pour and frac pressures will be. And again, I'll go back to Scott's question. If you're an experienced drilling manager, drilling engineer, and you've got the credentials within the organization, you'll be able to convince folks that your experience says we have to do it this way. It makes sense from a cost and safety point of view. NPD does allow in an exploration well to validate the pour pressure team's prediction, because that's all it is a prediction. Not till you get down there, if it's for real or not. And if you got the wrong mud weight, well, it's nice to have your 1,000 mud weight choke capability there. Dennis Moore. So I have a lot of respect for Dennis. He's one of the names out there. He came part of Cigna, and they're a good organization to go to for any kind of conventional or managed pressure drilling. And they came up with a very nice, I like pictures, guys. So here's your operating window and your window, your frac pressure and your pour pressure, and the green is your operating window. And conventionally, you've got your mud weight and you have your annulus friction pressure when the pumps are on. When it's time to make a connection, all you have is your mud weight that hopefully is the right mud weight, and is not going to prevent the well from either ballooning or kicking, etc. We have had incidents where choke pressure settings were not correct, and we have an NPD allowed the well to come in, and we didn't know it. Shell wrote a very good paper with Halliburton, very eloquent paper about how NPD can get you in trouble if you're not careful. And hats off to both those companies for bringing that to everybody's attention, because the we're a small industry. It's hard to hide secrets, and we're actually pretty good about sharing knowledge and mistakes. So if your operating window is smaller, let's say your frac pressure is starting to get closer to your pour pressure, then constant bottom hole pressure methods are the way to go, specifically using NPD. So you're going to go in with a lower mud weight because 9 times out of 10, you're not going or not be able to reduce your pump rates because you need that for either ROP, bit performance, or hole cleaning performance. So we reduce our mud weight. But when we make our connection, we're going to use the choke to compensate for the loss of AFP. And so we will stair step it down. The choke will close gradually, step by step, to make sure that we stay within the window. Make our connection, and then as the pumps are brought back online, we gradually back off the choke, and we go back to normal drilling, and there's no choke pressure. What we recommend typically is that we actually would like the choke to be on and active during the drilling of the well, and that provides some advantages. We call it seeing. Basically, you're sensitive to the well, and you allow the well to kind of talk to you in real time. If it's drinking or coming back, you can react. Versus if you don't have the choke, you basically are relying on your pits. And this is really it. That's all I had to share there. Okay.
Sorry, as my ear thing came out. Well, Calvin, thank you so much for taking the time to be able to present with us. I do appreciate it. We'll get the as soon as I get the PowerPoint from Calvin, we'll get it uploaded out there so that you guys can have it as a reference point. I always appreciate you guys so much being able to tune into the show. It means so much to me, and I know that with the lineup that we have coming up and with Calvin himself, we'll do nothing but continue to grow. The show is free for everybody that's out there. I've actually got that question a couple of times this week asking what was the cost. The cost is just my time, really, and that I'm not sending anybody a bill for it. So big thank you guys out there to everybody who has been watching the show, supporting the show, sharing the invite, sharing any of the posts that are out there. It really does help out. It does mean a lot to me. And hopefully we can continue to be able to bring you guys some of the best content out there. For those guys that are ladies and guys that are still out there watching, please let me know, what would you guys like to be able to see on future episodes? Are there any guests or somebody that you would like to hear speak? I have definitely gotten some referrals here recently. I'm trying to follow up on those. I'm trying to get this as booked out as far in advance as possible. And so we've got a lot of people saying, well, it didn't pull it up. All right, see if it'll do it. So Nils Benson, who stuck around for the whole thing, thank you so much. And then who's going to be on the show here in a couple of weeks? Peter Aaronshead. Good job, David and Calvin. So, guys, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to have David Ransom Wood next week, Peter Aird the week after that, Mark Anderson, Cartmeyer, and then the artificial intelligence and machine learning team from IBM will be coming on and doing a presentation. If I'm forgetting anything else, I'm sorry. Just follow the Vidor Locksmith hashtag. And as always, know your industry. And I'll click the button that I'm supposed to already have pulled up because I forgot it. And there we go. Oh, still